Welcome to the Wife Stories YouTube channel. New video every day, and don't forget to subscribe. Here we go.
John. That name showed up on my phone with an unexpected chime, distant but distinct. I remember it cutting through the late afternoon silence like an unwelcome guest. I was standing in the kitchen, numb fingers pressed against the countertop. Strange how a simple notification can ignite an entire chain of thoughts, like striking a match in a dry forest. I glanced at the phone, and there it was. Missed call from John, my best friend since high school, the man who'd once been as close to me as my own brother. The same man who'd shown up at my door a few days earlier with a busted lip and a heavy bag in hand. Now his name on that screen felt like an echo, a premonition of everything I was afraid to acknowledge. I didn't answer it. Couldn't. Instead, I stared at those 5 letters, John, until the phone's glow faded. A few nights ago, he'd stood on my doorstep, exhausted, shoulders sagging. His wife had kicked him out, he said, though I never really asked for details. I tried to be the good friend. I tried to say all the right things, offered him our couch, handed him an ice pack for his swollen cheek, gave him a glass of water, and told him I'd always have his back. Or maybe in that moment, I was just too shocked, too naive, to sense the tension coiling under my own roof. In the quiet aftermath of his arrival, I recall the faint stirring of unease in my gut, like a distant thunder you can't quite place. My wife, Anna, suggested we leave him alone for the night. She was gentle, caring. That's one of the things I always loved about her. She knew how to make people feel welcome. Looking at them then, in the hush of our hallway, I tried to ignore the small shift in her expression, like relief, or maybe curiosity. I shook it off. Who was I to suspect my own wife? Especially with John looking so lost. We had dinner together. She served homemade soup and fresh bread. I remember John's faint grin when he complimented her cooking. I remember Anna's blush, the sparkle in her eyes. I told myself it was just gratitude. Nothing more. But that night, lying in bed, the air felt heavier than usual. She was turned away, eyes on the far wall. I thought maybe she was worried about him, or about our finances, or about any number of ordinary things that keep couples awake. But an unnamed alarm bell was ringing deep in my skull. The next day, I left early for a jog. Well, I called it a jog, but in truth I ended up walking half the route, mind cluttered with restless thoughts. I got back to find them in the kitchen, leaning close, whispering over coffee. That was the first time I felt it. Really felt it. A tightness in my chest, an acute sense of being an outsider in my own home. I heard Anna laugh, a sound too bright for a moment that should have felt awkward. John shifted, glancing at me with polite surprise, as though I was interrupting something private. I swallowed a bitter taste, told myself I was imagining things, told myself to trust her. But then her phone, my wife's phone, left on the counter just 2 days later. I was trying to order takeout. Sushi, I think. She'd said she was too busy with chores to place the order herself, so I picked it up. A small detail that wouldn't matter under normal circumstances, except this time, her notepad app was open. One line glared back at me. Remind me to bring condoms. The shape of the letters hammered into my mind. Then the small blue emoji next to it. Anna used that exact emoji whenever she wanted to spice up our private life, a kind of inside code. The shock was physical. I felt my legs weaken, a chill creeping over me, like an icy wind through the cracks of a closed window. I stood there, phone in hand, 1,000 questions swirling. She was in the next room. Was this a note for me? Why would she put it in her phone so cryptically? But no. I knew. A man always knows. Everything else, the tension, the odd glances, the laughter that quieted the moment I walked in, all of it clicked together. My heart pounded, but my mind refused to accept it. Instead, I just closed the phone. Nothing dramatic, nothing wild, just a slow, stifled breath. Then I placed her phone where I'd found it and forced myself to pretend everything was fine. We ate dinner that night in relative silence. John was out, probably buying more bourbon, or so he said. Anna glanced at me several times across the table. She must have sensed something in my expression, but I kept my face rigid. If I opened my mouth, I was afraid the bile would spill out, unstoppable. So I let the quiet fill the room until she finally said she was tired and retreated to the bedroom. My mind spun with images, an ugly slideshow. Anna and John, their stolen glances, her laughter, his bruised face that first night. It all fit together too well. As I washed the dishes, my reflection in the window looked hollow. My own eyes stared back, almost questioning me. Are you sure? Is this real? I scrubbed plates until my knuckles were red, until the scorching water reminded me I was alive. That night I barely slept. I kept hearing her phone's beep, kept seeing that note. When I did drift off, I dreamed of her smiling at me from the far end of a dark tunnel. Behind her stood John, a vague silhouette with arms folded. I woke up gasping, covered in cold sweat. Anna was asleep beside me, hair spread across the pillow. She looked peaceful, innocent. It felt like a mockery. I hated myself for suspecting her. I hated the thought that she might be betraying me. The following day, I tried to act normal. The slow boil inside me threatened to erupt, but I contained it with a forced, mechanical routine. Shower, coffee, keys, car. I drove to the office, though I barely did any work. My mind was on them, together, possibly, at my home. My friend, my wife. I pictured them whispering, hands brushing, eyes locking. Pictured them crossing that line I never thought either of them would dare approach. My insides twisted until I felt sick. I had to step outside several times just to breathe. By late afternoon, I decided I needed proof, not just to confront them, but to keep my sanity. I made an excuse to my boss about feeling unwell and left. It wasn't a total lie. My stomach was in knots. My chest felt tight. I remember driving back, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The roads blurred around me, each traffic light stinging my eyes. My breathing turned shallow. My heart hammered. I realized then how dangerously close I was to losing control. The quiet, polite man I'd always been was cracking. I pulled into my driveway. The house looked the same as ever. White siding, trimmed hedges, a place meant for safety and warmth. My rational side told me to walk in calmly. My darker side whispered to barge in. But I had no plan. I just parked and took a deep breath. Then I realized something. The curtains in the living room were drawn, which was rare in the middle of the day. I felt a spike of alarm. I got out quietly, trying not to slam the car door. My breath fogged in the chilly air. Instead of entering through the front, I circled around to the back, recalling we had a sliding glass door there. Maybe I just wanted to see if they were inside. Maybe I needed that final push. Slipping around the corner, I heard faint whispers. My pulse slammed in my ears. That small garden path, once a tranquil place where Anna and I used to sip morning coffee, felt like a predator's trail. I reached the back door, which was cracked open. Through the gap, I could see the living room. I heard voices, low and urgent. And then, a sudden hush, replaced by a soft moan I recognized as my wife's. That sound gutted me. I froze, 1,000 shards of broken trust ripping into my chest. I leaned a fraction closer. My vision blurred as I caught sight of them. John's hands on her waist, her hair fanned out across the couch cushion, her top half removed, her mouth parted in a breathless gasp. For a second, my brain refused to register it. This was my home, my wife, my best friend. The sexual tension in the air was thick enough to taste. She turned her head, murmuring his name, and I heard a rustle of movement. My legs trembled. I closed my eyes, tried to force the image away, but it was too late. It was burned into me. My world fractured. I didn't crash in or cause a scene. The old me, the me of 2 days ago, might have. Instead, I backed away silently, heart pounding. I retreated down the steps, across the lawn, until I was standing by my car again. The cold air sliced through my lungs, yet I couldn't feel anything but numbness. Part of me wanted to storm Mac in, rip him off her, scream at them both. But I couldn't. Everything I believed about my marriage, my friendship, my identity, had shattered in that single moment. I felt no rage yet, only a terrifying emptiness. I got in my car. Keys in the ignition, engine rumbling. I stared at the house. 1 minute. 5 minutes. My hand shook so hard I could hardly grip the wheel. Then, without a word, I backed out of the driveway and drove off, leaving behind the two people I loved most, tangled in betrayal. For a while, I just drove endlessly, my thoughts swirling. I ended up in some empty parking lot behind a closed-down supermarket. The sky was gray, matching the color of my mood. I closed my eyes, listened to the ticking of the engine. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I yanked it out, half expecting to see Anna's name. But it was just a spam text. I threw the phone onto the passenger seat, my chest heaving in silent, ragged breaths. I asked myself, why? How? What did I do wrong? But I was too afraid to answer. Too afraid to admit maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe I'd never been enough. A cold calm settled over me after a while. It was the kind of calm you get right before a storm hits, when the air grows still and all the birds vanish. Eventually, I turned the key and started driving again. I found a cheap motel on the edge of town and checked in without any luggage, paying cash for the night. The clerk didn't ask questions, and I didn't volunteer any. In that cramped, anonymous room with stained curtains and an odd smell, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall until darkness fell. Time lost meaning. My phone rang a few times, Anna's name on the screen. I couldn't bear to answer. Sometime around midnight, I finally picked up when she called again. I let her voice wash over me, trembling with alarm, asking where I was, what was happening. She sounded frantic, crying, saying John had left abruptly and she was worried sick. That she'd called everyone looking for me. Her voice cracked with genuine fear, or maybe just guilt. But I stayed cold. Let her talk. Gave no answers. After a long pause, I said I needed space. Then I hung up and turned the phone off. The quiet felt like a shield. I had no idea how to face her, or him. I didn't sleep well. Nightmares plagued me. Images of her body wrapped around him, the taste of betrayal on my tongue. Yet beneath that, there was a faint sense of guilt, like I was the one who'd failed. Could that be possible? Had I pushed her away somehow? The questions circled endlessly, a vulture waiting for my spirit to die. By morning, I resolved to see the truth all the way through, but I didn't know how. My mind teetered between heartbreak and fury. But the rage still didn't come. It was just a trembling emptiness. Early the next day, I drove to a storage facility on the other side of town, where I kept a few personal items from my old life. Some sports memorabilia, boxes of college junk, a dusty treadmill I never used anymore. I don't even know why I went there. Maybe I needed a neutral space, somewhere I could stand among my past possessions and think. The place smelled of dust and stale air. I leaned against a stack of boxes, slid down to the floor, and let out a long, shaky breath. Memories of Anna flickered across my mind. Our wedding day, her eyes shining with joy, her voice quivering when she said, "I do." The time we danced barefoot in the kitchen, the radio playing an old love song, the nights we stayed up late planning a family we never actually had. I tried to pinpoint where it all went wrong, but I couldn't find a single moment. Maybe it was a gradual drift. Maybe I just stopped listening. Or maybe she did. I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes, but they wouldn't fall. Instead, a cold heaviness settled in my chest. Eventually, I left the storage place, emptier than before, and wandered into a nearby diner. The waitress brought me coffee. I sipped it, barely tasting. Then I spotted my reflection in the window. A haggard man with dark rings under his eyes, hair disheveled, shoulders hunched. I almost didn't recognize myself. I asked the reflection a question. "So what are you going to do about it?" But the reflection had no answers. My phone buzzed again. This time, I saw John's name. I stared at the screen for a solid minute before accepting the call. His voice came through quietly, words tense and rushed. "Man, listen. Can we just talk?" I clenched my jaw, said nothing at first. He breathed heavily. "I'm sorry, Mark. I swear I never wanted to hurt you. It just happened." My grip tightened around the phone until I thought it might crack. That's when I felt the first flicker of anger, like a spark in a dark room. I told him I'd meet him that afternoon at a bar not far from my office, a place we used to grab a drink in simpler times. He agreed, then went silent, as if waiting for me to unload on him. I just clicked off without another word. The waitress asked if I needed anything else, and I shook my head. My mind was heavy with the weight of a confrontation I dreaded but needed. I got there early. The bar was dim, musty, practically empty. Football posters on the walls, old wooden stools along the counter. I took a booth in the corner, away from prying eyes, ordered a whiskey, and nursed it while staring at the battered tabletop. Time seemed suspended until John walked in. He looked worn, hair unkempt, eyes darting nervously. He spotted me and approached with cautious steps. We sat opposite each other without a handshake, without a friendly pat on the back. Just silence. Finally, he exhaled. "There's nothing I can say to make this right," he began. I stared at him, waited. His eyes flickered with guilt. "Anna, she was lonely, man. She felt you drifting away, and I was in a bad place with my marriage. We got close. We crossed a line." He tried to elaborate, but my glare stopped him. I asked him one question. "When?" My voice came out hoarse. He swallowed. "A couple months back. After you canceled those dinners, got so busy at work." I nodded once, bitterness twisting my gut. 2 months. That entire time, he and I had still been talking about sports, sharing jokes, while he was inching closer to my wife behind my back. "You're my best friend," I said, voice low. "I've known you since we were kids. How could you do this to me?" My knuckles turned white around the glass. He stammered, "I don't have an excuse. I didn't think it would go so far. We were both hurting. He trailed off. I saw tears in his eyes. Maybe they were genuine. Maybe not. It didn't matter. My chest tightened as I recalled that scene on my couch. The raw betrayal. I wanted to slam his face into the table, wanted to tear the place apart. But a numb calm took hold of me instead. I told him to pay the tab, stood up, and left. No threats, no violence. Just a final look over my shoulder, a look that told him we were done. Let him carry that guilt alone. I'd always prided myself on being rational, but inside I felt a roiling sense of injustice. The next steps were a haze. I knew I had to confront Anna, but a part of me wasn't ready. I thought about leaving her a letter, disappearing for a while. Maybe that was the coward's way out. By the time I reached my car, though, the anger had begun to spark. It flickered in my chest like a pilot light. I sat there behind the wheel, feeling it grow. She was still my wife, yet she had broken our vows, humiliated me with my closest friend, and I hadn't even given her a chance to explain. When I finally walked through my front door that evening, the house was quiet. I heard her footsteps in the hallway. She appeared, eyes red-rimmed, hair pulled back like she'd been anxiously pacing. "Mark," she breathed, stepping closer. I said nothing. Just let her see the hardness in my stare. She reached out, but I moved away. The silence stretched so long it was almost suffocating. Can we talk?" she whispered. My throat constricted. "You want to talk about condoms?" I replied, voice low. She flinched, tears swimming in her eyes. Her lips parted, words stumbling out. I'm sorry. I never meant to. Don't. I cut her off, stepping back. Don't say you never meant to hurt me. You knew exactly what this would do. The tension snapped like a frayed wire. She started talking, words tripping over each other, explaining how I'd become distant, how lonely she felt, how she never planned for this to happen with John. It was just a spark that turned into a fire. A part of me wanted to cover my ears, not hear anymore. But she insisted, tears streaming. I'm so sorry, Mark. Please, what do you want from me? I spat, voice trembling. Forgiveness. Another chance. You just spent months lying, sneaking around behind my back, and now you think sorry fixes it. My voice rose, echoing in the hallway. She stood there shaking, eyes wide, guilt etched across her face. A flicker of my old self wanted to hold her, to comfort her tears. But the cold, hollow man I'd become refused. Instead, I let her stand there in her anguish. She whispered my name, reached for my hand. I pulled away as if her touch were poison. We stood a foot apart, yet it felt like a canyon between us. The rage simmered in my veins, overshadowed by a deeper sense of betrayal. You brought him into my home, I said, voice taut. You kissed him, touched him, did God knows what in our bedroom. No, she cut in sharply. We never in our bedroom. It was just on the couch. The stupidity of her words hit both of us at once. She clapped a hand over her mouth, realizing how bad that sounded, how it changed nothing. My stare turned icy, jaw set like stone. Without waiting for more, I turned and walked upstairs, slamming the door of the guest room shut behind me. I couldn't sleep in our bed. Not that night. Maybe never again. She didn't follow me. Maybe she knew better than to push further. I stayed awake for hours, mind racing with images of them together, my body trembling between fury and heartbreak. The house felt alien, every creak a taunt. By dawn, I was numb. She tried to approach me again the next morning, eyes swollen from crying. I brushed past her in the hallway like she wasn't even there, grabbed my keys, walked out without a word. I could taste the bitterness on my tongue. She deserved a chance to speak, but I couldn't find it in me to give her that space. Instead, I wandered downtown, aimless, carrying a rage that felt more like a slow poison than an immediate explosion. At some point, I found myself leaning against a graffitied wall behind a rundown building, breathing heavily like I'd sprinted a marathon. Every nerve in my body screamed for release, for vengeance. My mind spun with possibilities. Could I call her family and expose her betrayal? Could I turn John's life upside down, ruin his career, drag him through the mud? My heart pounded with the need to do something. But I wasn't a violent man. I never had been. Yet, as the minutes stretched, I realized I did need a form of revenge. Something that would let me reclaim my self-respect. Something that would show them both I wasn't to be trifled with. My phone buzzed with a message from Anna. Where are you? I'm sorry. Please come back. I'm worried. I read it, felt nothing, and slid the phone into my pocket. The old me might have tried to fix things, but this new, hollow me wanted them to pay. Her and John both. I started with the simplest step, withdrew half of our joint savings into my own account. Then I called a friend who worked in real estate, told him I was considering selling the house. I'd never do that behind her back permanently, but the thought of shaking her world felt right in that moment. Something to remind her that everything we owned, everything we built, could vanish at my word. By late afternoon, I found myself at a lawyer's office. No appointment, just walked in and asked if someone could talk to me about divorce proceedings. The secretary gave me a sympathetic look and said they could squeeze me in for a consultation. I sat there under flickering fluorescent lights, fiddling with a plastic pen. My anger had turned cold, methodical. A voice in my head whispered, "Make them regret underestimating you." When a brisk, middle-aged attorney finally greeted me, I told her the basics. Married 10 years, no kids, house in both names, discovered my wife's affair. She asked if I was sure I wanted to pursue immediate action. The question lingered. Was I sure? I had no illusions about wanting to keep Anna after what I saw, but a piece of me felt sick at the thought of losing that life forever. In the end, I told the lawyer I just wanted to know my options. She explained, step by step, how it would go. The legal route, property division, spousal support. I nodded, numb. By the time I left, I had a folder of documents in my hand and a swirling storm in my head. Anna tried calling me multiple times that evening. I ignored her. The next morning, I mustered the courage to go home, stepping inside as if walking into a battlefield. She stood in the living room, looking like she hadn't slept. Her eyes latched onto the folder in my hand. Fear flickered in them. I tossed the papers onto the coffee table. "Read them," I said curtly. "Then you'll see how sorry you really are." She burst into tears, kneeling by the table to flip through the pages. I expected satisfaction seeing her panic. Instead, I felt only a hollow ache. Her sobs racked her frame. She whispered, "Please, Mark, don't do this. Let's talk. Let's try therapy. Something. I love you. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But you and we can't just end like this." I crossed my arms, fighting the urge to comfort her. "Tell me why I should believe you love me after sleeping with John in our own living room," I demanded, voice shaking. She didn't have a real answer, just repeated how lonely she was, how she felt I wasn't there for her. That's when anger flared in me again. Is that supposed to excuse betraying me with my best friend? I roared, slamming a fist onto the table. The sudden crack of impact echoed. Anna cowered, tears streaming down her cheeks. I stared at my trembling hand, half shocked at my own outburst. I'd never raised a hand to her or threatened her, and though I hadn't struck her, my rage was a new, terrifying force. She sniffled, wiping her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered again. "I'll do anything." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Anything, huh? How about turning back time, erasing the images seared into my brain? Can you do that?" She stared at the floor, silence her only reply. I sank into the couch, the same couch where she and John had. My stomach twisted. "Get rid of this couch," I hissed. She lifted her head, blinking, not comprehending. "I said get rid of it," I repeated. "I don't want it in my house anymore." Without waiting for a response, I rose and walked out of the room. She followed me into the hallway. "Mark." I spun around. "Don't say my name like that." Her lips trembled. In that moment, I realized my revenge was searing her, but it wasn't easing my own pain. I stepped out the front door and drove away again. For the next week, we barely saw each other. I slept in the guest room. She tiptoed around as though the floors might break beneath her. Every time she tried to approach me, I shut her down with icy glares or curt remarks. I told her I was considering filing immediately. She pleaded for one chance to talk, to explain everything. And one afternoon, I finally let her speak. Really speak. She told me about how she and John had bonded over their shared sense of abandonment, how it started with harmless conversations, how one night he kissed her and she didn't stop him. She swore they'd tried to end it, but circumstances kept pulling them back. My rational mind told me this was all standard infidelity talk, excuses layered with regret. My heart told me she was feeding me poison, one tear at a time. Oddly enough, I found myself numb again. I let her words drift over me like a cold wind, stinging but not quite piercing. She begged me to see a counselor with her, to take time away together, anything to heal. But I refused. I felt the need to tear down what she valued, to see her suffer the consequences of this betrayal. And yet, behind that need, I sensed my own guilt surfacing. Maybe I hadn't been the husband she needed. Maybe I'd become so wrapped up in work, so distant, that she saw no other way. That was the darkest question of all, the one that gnawed at me late at night. Could this be my fault? The following weekend, I decided to act. I asked Anna to leave the house for a few hours. told her I needed space. She complied, although she looked terrified. Once she was gone, I began gathering her things. Not all of them, just enough to show her I meant business. Packed them into boxes and stacked them by the door. Then I walked through the rooms, surveying the life we'd built. The wedding photos, the souvenirs from trips, the worn sofa we'd replaced a few days before. I found our old wedding album in a drawer. Slowly, I flipped through it, page by page, seeing her radiant smile, my proud grin. I shut it with a heavy heart. That man in the pictures was gone. John tried calling me once more. I didn't pick up. He sent a text. "I want to make amends. I care about both of you." The nerve. My blood boiled reading those words. I typed back, "Stay out of my life," and blocked him. For good measure, I typed an email to my boss at work, requesting a temporary leave. I needed time to unravel the mess inside me. When Anna returned, she saw the boxes, her eyes widening. "You're throwing me out?" she asked, voice trembling. I stayed silent a long moment, then said, "I'm giving you a chance to realize how easily I can uproot this marriage. Pack your things if you want to leave, or try to fix it if you can figure out how." I felt monstrous speaking those words. She lowered her head, tears brimming again, and quietly began to move the boxes from the doorway. She didn't fight, didn't scream, just carried them upstairs. There was something heartbreaking about that silent compliance. Afterward, she came to me, hesitated, and said, "I'll stay, if you'll let me. I just want a chance." I gave a curt nod, still battling the swirl of contradictory feelings. Part of me wanted to evict her, watch her suffer alone. Another part, a distant, wounded part, still remembered how much I'd once loved her. That tension between hatred and longing ate at me like acid. That night, I wandered onto the back porch where the betrayal first became painfully real. The place where I saw them. The memory cut like broken glass. The night air was cold, my breath visible in small puffs. I sank into a chair and stared at the dark yard. Anna stepped out after a while, standing quietly behind me. I didn't look at her. She cleared her throat, voice hushed. "I'm so sorry, Mark. I don't have the right words." "Neither do I," I murmured, still gazing into the darkness. A long silence settled between us. Then she dared to step closer, placing a hand lightly on my shoulder. I stiffened, but didn't brush it away. She kneeled beside me, tears shining on her cheeks in the pale light. Softly, she said, "I can't undo what I did, but I want to try to mend what's left. If you'll let me." I stared into her eyes, searching for something real. Sincerity, guilt, desperation. All of it was there. My heart twisted. The numbness I'd nurtured cracked a bit. "I don't know," I whispered. "I don't know if I can ever look at you without seeing." I broke off, swallowing hard. She nodded, tears sliding down her face. For a brief moment, I wanted to hold her, to bury my face in her neck and grieve together. But I stood instead, her hand dropping away as I walked inside. I needed distance. The pain was too raw. In the days that followed, a kind of stalemate took shape. We coexisted in the same house, barely speaking. I busied myself fixing small things. A leaky faucet, a squeaky door hinge. In truth, I was avoiding her eyes. Meanwhile, she tiptoed around, trying to give me space while occasionally offering small gestures, making my coffee in the morning, folding my laundry, like she was begging for acceptance. Each gesture made me recoil. I felt manipulated, even if that wasn't her intention. Finally, one afternoon, she got up the nerve to mention counseling again. This time, something about her tone seemed more steadfast. "Mark," she said, "I found someone who specializes in couples dealing with infidelity. I know you don't owe me anything, but I'm asking you, just one session." My immediate reaction was to dismiss it, but her posture was different, still remorseful, but with a trace of determination, and I realized I hadn't truly decided whether to keep punishing her or try to rebuild. The anger in me had turned into a constant ache that left me exhausted. So after a tense pause, I muttered, "Fine. One session." She blinked in surprise, then nodded. "Thank you." I gave a stiff shrug. This wasn't forgiveness. This was a reluctant step toward clarity. For me as much as for her. Before the appointment, I received a call from John's new phone number. I guess he borrowed someone else's phone. I didn't answer. I refused to let him intrude on this fragile stage. Anna and I drove separately to the counselor's office, an unremarkable building downtown. The waiting room had pale yellow walls, an awkward arrangement of chairs, and a receptionist who spoke in hushed tones. When the counselor, a tall woman named Catherine, greeted us, she ushered us into a small warm room. Plush chairs faced each other, soft lighting, a box of tissues within reach. Anna and I sat side by side, a chasm between us despite the physical closeness. Catherine introduced herself, then asked us to describe what brought us in. Neither of us spoke for a while. Finally, Anna haltingly confessed to the affair, tears choking her voice. The counselor nodded, wrote a few notes, then asked me how it made me feel. That question seemed ridiculous. How did it make me feel? My entire life had been ripped apart. But I tried to speak, voice trembling. Betrayed. Angry. Confused. It was all I could manage. Over the next hour, Catherine probed deeper. I found myself admitting fears I hadn't said aloud. Fears of not being good enough, of being replaced. Anna admitted her own insecurities, how she craved attention and emotional closeness, how John's arrival filled a void she thought I no longer cared to fill. It stung to hear, but it also forced me to confront my role. The counselor explained that betrayal rarely happens in a vacuum. The idea that, in some twisted way, we both contributed to this mess. That didn't absolve Anna, but it made me see my own blind spots. I hated it. Yet a spark of relief surfaced. Maybe there was some explanation, not just raw malice. Walking out, I felt drained, but a fraction less suffocated. Anna quietly asked if we could schedule another session. I shrugged. I guess. We parted ways in the parking lot without touching. She looked at me with those red-rimmed eyes, wanting reassurance, but I had none to give. I drove off alone, pulled into a deserted gas station, and just sat there trying to breathe. That evening, I returned to a house that felt marginally less hostile. She'd cooked dinner, a simple pasta dish. I ate in silence, but we were at the same table. Afterward, she asked softly, "Would you like me to sleep in the guest room tonight?" I hesitated. Everything in me said yes. Do that, keep her at a distance. But the numbness had turned to weariness, and the weariness had turned to something else. A small, battered sense of longing, perhaps. "Sleep where you want," I mumbled finally. She nodded and spent the night in our bedroom alone, while I dozed off on the couch. Yet the next morning, I found her in the kitchen, making coffee, and we exchanged a few words that almost felt normal. Over the next couple of weeks, we kept going to therapy. John remained a ghost in the background, out of my immediate life. Occasionally, she'd get a text from him that she'd show me before deleting, saying he wanted to apologize or check if she was okay. Each time, I told her to ignore him. Each time, she complied. The sessions forced us to speak truths we'd buried for years. Resentments, frustrations, unspoken desires. It was painful, raw, and sometimes we walked out feeling shattered all over again. But slowly, I began to see a shred of possibility, like a faint crack of light under a door. Maybe we could fix this, or maybe we'd only find closure, a civilized way to part without hatred. I didn't know yet. My thirst for revenge dulled, replaced by an urge to salvage something from the wreckage. That urge clashed with the vivid memories of her with John. I was stuck between wanting to hold her close and wanting to vanish. The push and pull was relentless. One night, after a particularly intense session, we sat on the living room floor, where the old couch used to be, and just talked. No accusations, no tears, just small, cautious talk about everyday things. She asked if I remembered the first time we met. A ghost of a smile crossed my face. I did remember. We bumped into each other in the produce aisle at a grocery store, both reaching for the same bag of apples. It was mundane, but in that moment, we laughed like kids. Telling that story now felt surreal. It was as if those two happy strangers were entirely different people. I caught her gazing at me with a hesitant softness. Despite the ache, something in me stirred. The woman before me was still Anna, still the person I'd shared a life with for 10 years. But she was also the person who'd betrayed me. My insides churned. I wanted to kiss her and scream at her all at once. That contradiction nearly tore me apart. In the end, I just cleared my throat and muttered that I was tired. She nodded, understanding. We retreated to separate rooms again. Eventually, I realized if we were truly going to move forward, I have to face John directly. Confront him or find closure. I wasn't sure which. So one chilly evening, I drove to his new apartment. Anna didn't know. I didn't tell her. He texted me from a different number a week prior, giving me his address in case I wanted to talk. I arrived at a modest, run-down complex, took the elevator to the 3rd floor. My heartbeat drummed in my ears. When he opened the door, his eyes went wide. He stepped back warily, letting me in. The place was sparse, boxes half unpacked, a single couch, a TV on the floor. He offered me a seat, but I stayed standing. He looked like he was waiting for a punch. I scanned the room, noticing a half-finished bottle of bourbon on the coffee table. Memories of him turning up at my home with that same brand flickered through my mind. I felt my fists clench. He broke the silence. "Mark, thanks for coming. Look, I know what I did was unforgivable. But I just want you to know that I raised a hand to stop him." "Shut up," I said calmly. He closed his mouth. My voice was as cold as ice. "I'm not here for apologies. I'm here to see the man who betrayed my trust, destroyed my marriage, and had the nerve to text me about it after the fact." John bowed his head. "I know. I deserve whatever you. I'm not here to beat you up," I said, surprising myself. My anger was contained, almost surgical. "I just need to look you in the eye and say that you're no friend of mine, that I want no contact from you ever again. And if you come near my wife, if you contact her or me again, I will ruin whatever life you have left. Understand?" He swallowed, nodded, tears glistening. "I understand." For a moment, we stood in heavy silence. I observed him, my former best friend, now reduced to a trembling figure in a half-empty apartment. My mind flashed back to simpler times, high school, nights playing video games, college road trips. I wondered if that friendship was ever real, or if it had all been a prelude to this betrayal. The bitterness in my gut deepened. I turned to go, then paused. Was it worth it? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated, tears streaking down his face. "No," he croaked. "I lost everything." I nodded, turned, and walked out. The elevator ride down was stifling. My chest felt tight, but I realized something. I didn't feel the same thirst for vengeance. Seeing him that broken, that pathetic, gave me no satisfaction, just a sad sense of finality, like closing a book I'd once enjoyed. Outside, the wind chilled my skin. I stood by my car, took a shaky breath. For the first time in weeks, I felt a hint of release. Maybe I could move forward now. Maybe Anna and I could figure out whether we still belonged together. My eyes flickered up to the 3rd floor window. The curtain was closed. I got in my car and drove home. Anna was waiting in the living room when I arrived. She looked at my face, then at the keys in my hand. "You went to see him," she said softly. I nodded. She swallowed, bracing herself. And nothing," I replied. "He knows the price of trying to talk to either of us again." She tried to read my expression. "Did it help you feel any better?" I exhaled. I don't know. Maybe a little. She nodded, shoulders relaxing a fraction. I've been thinking, she said after a pause. If you want me to move out for a while, maybe that's best. I studied her face. She wasn't pleading now, just offering. It felt like she was finally giving me space to make a decision without her pushing. The tension in my chest lessened. No, I said, surprising both of us. I don't want to come home to an empty house. Not yet. Her eyes filled with tears again, but she blinked them away, nodding. Slowly, she reached for my hand, as if asking permission. This time, I let her take it. Her fingers were warm, trembling slightly against mine. We stood there, not quite an embrace, but closer than we'd been in a long time. The days that followed were a cautious attempt at rebuilding. We continued counseling, endured painful conversations, and tried to carve out new routines. I still slept in the guest room, though occasionally, in the darkest hours of night, I'd wander into our bedroom, watch her sleeping form, then return to my solitary bed. She gave me space, but also made small gestures that reminded me of better times, cooking my favorite breakfast, leaving a note on the counter wishing me a good day. I responded with hesitant gratitude, letting her see I noticed, but not letting her close enough to heal the wound completely. Therapy sessions grew more intense. Catherine pushed us to confront the root causes of the affair. Anna confessed she'd felt unappreciated, invisible. I admitted I'd grown complacent, distracted by work, ignoring the emotional distance between us. That was a bitter pill, realizing I might have contributed to the environment that allowed John to step in. But Catherine reminded us that Anna still made the choice to betray. It wasn't about placing blame neatly. It was about understanding the tangled lines that led us here. One evening, about a month after the discovery, I came home late. Anna was waiting at the dining table, a single lamp casting a soft glow on her face. She prepared a meal, but I had no appetite. Instead, I sat across from her, stared at my hands. The silence was thick. Finally, she asked, "Are we going to make it?" I clenched my jaw. The question had no simple answer. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Sometimes I think yes. Sometimes I can't see how." She nodded, blinking back tears. "Well, for what it's worth, I'm not giving up. I know I broke us, but I still love you." My chest constricted. That word, love, felt foreign, laden with contradictions. I pressed my palms against the table, leaning forward. "What does that even mean now?" I asked, voice trembling with a mixture of anger and desperation. "What is love if you can betray it so easily?" She inhaled sharply, tears slipping free. "I don't have a perfect answer, Mark. But I believe love isn't a one-time choice. It's a daily effort. I made a horrible choice, but I want to try, every day, to earn a shred of your trust back." Emotion swelled in my chest, threatening to choke me. For a moment, I thought I might break down, let the tears come. But I stayed cold on the outside. I stood abruptly, walked around the table, and to her surprise, I pulled her to her feet and held her. I didn't speak. She clung to me, sobbing quietly, her tears soaking my shirt. My heart pounded with conflicting emotions, sorrow, anger, longing. Yet in that raw moment, I felt a flicker of warmth in the numbness. From then on, our attempts to reconnect were cautious but more frequent. We had painful talks about intimacy, about how I struggled to erase the images of her and John. She offered me every transparency she could. Phone passwords, schedules, constant communication. It felt intrusive, forced, yet necessary if we were to rebuild even a sliver of trust. Eventually, I moved back into the bedroom. The first night, we lay side by side, staring at the ceiling. We didn't touch, didn't speak, but the physical closeness was a step. Over the next weeks, we found small moments of genuine affection. A kiss on the forehead before leaving for work, a shared blanket on the couch while watching a TV show. Each time, it felt fragile, like balancing on a wire. Anger still surged at odd times, especially when I saw something that reminded me of John. A random sports ad, a certain brand of bourbon. We'd be in the middle of an otherwise calm evening, and I'd snap or go silent. Anna would tear up, sometimes lash back that she couldn't change the past. We'd retreat to separate corners, only to come back again, exhausted by the conflict. Catherine said that healing would be a non-linear process, full of relapses. Some days I believed we could find a new normal. Other days, I was sure we were doomed. But every morning, we chose to try again. That was the only thread of hope we had. The mutual choice to keep stepping forward into uncertainty. Then, one chilly afternoon, something shifted. I found Anna kneeling by a box of old photos, ones we tossed aside during my initial rage. She was holding a shot of us from a trip to the mountains, smiling at the camera in front of a lake. I knelt beside her. She looked at me, eyes brimming. "I miss these people," she whispered, voice trembling. They were so happy. I gazed at the photo, remembering the crisp air, the golden leaves, the way we'd laughed that day. A lump formed in my throat. "They were," I said softly. "But they were also naive." She sniffled. "Maybe. But they still had something worth fighting for." She placed the photo in my hand, her fingers brushing mine. Our eyes met, and in that moment I felt a surge of emotion I hadn't allowed myself to feel in weeks. Love, heartbreak, regret, all tangled together. Slowly, I leaned in and pressed my forehead to hers. We stayed like that. No words, just breathing together. It wasn't a fairy tale reconciliation. It was more like standing on a battlefield after the bombs have fallen, looking at the wreckage, deciding whether to rebuild or walk away. We chose to rebuild, piece by jagged piece, uncertain if the final structure would ever resemble what we had before. But at least we were in it together. Over the following weeks, we decided to redo parts of the house. Fresh paint, new furniture, small symbolic gestures to create a space that didn't echo the affair. One evening, as we painted the living room walls a light gray, I found myself smiling at Anna's messy hair speckled with paint. She caught me looking, and for the first time in months, we shared a soft, almost shy smile. My heart clenched, remembering how easily we used to laugh. In that moment, I felt something akin to hope. We never heard from John again. Whether he moved away or simply honored my threat, I didn't care. He was a ghost I chose to bury. Life moved forward, day by day. Some nights, I still woke up sweating, haunted by flashes of him touching her. But Anna's presence and her steady remorse eased me back to reality. We both carried scars now. One night, after finishing a counseling session, I realized something had changed in me. The suffocating resentment had lessened. The images of her betrayal, though still painful, were no longer an open wound, but a scabbed-over reminder of what we almost lost. Our intimacy returned slowly, hesitantly, each kiss carrying an undercurrent of sorrow and gratitude. In time, we found a tentative rhythm again. Maybe it wasn't the grand vengeance story some part of me had wanted. Maybe it was just the messy reality of two flawed people who, despite everything, couldn't let go. I never forgot what she did, and I still felt a lingering sadness when I looked at her. But I also saw the woman who was fighting to keep what we had, and I recognized my own failures. Months after the discovery, on a cool spring morning, Anna and I went for a walk along a small lake near our neighborhood. She held my hand, and I allowed it. The air smelled of fresh grass and distant flowers. We talked about nothing in particular. Her work, my next project, the weather. It felt almost normal. And I realized that was the kind of vengeance I ended up taking. Not a brutal revenge that burned everything to the ground, but a stubborn commitment to live on, to heal in a way that defied the betrayal, to show that I couldn't be broken so completely. As we rounded a bend, she leaned her head on my shoulder. I tensed for a second, then exhaled, letting her rest there. Maybe she was still waiting for the day I'd pack up and leave, or maybe she believed we were truly on the mend. Either way, for now, we were still walking forward together. And that was enough. Yes, John had come to my door with a bruised face and a bottle of bourbon, igniting a chain reaction that tore my world apart. Yes, my wife had scribbled that damning note about condoms, leaving it like a trap for me to find. Yes, I'd confronted them in a silent, choking heartbreak. And yet here we were, older, wounded, but still standing. In the end, I discovered something. Hatred and coldness can only sustain you for so long. The real challenge is finding a shred of warmth in the ashes, deciding whether it's worth salvaging. I chose to salvage what I could. That meant living with the knowledge that Anna and I would never again be who we were before, but maybe we could become something else, something forged by pain, tested by betrayal, and held together by a stubborn, battered love. I don't know if we'll last forever. Some days, doubt creeps in like a slow tide. But for now, I'm here. I'm real. And I know that despite everything, I survived the lies. And if those lies ever come back to devour us both, well, at least I'll be strong enough to stand my ground. Because I've already faced the worst storm a man can face, and I'm still breathing. So that's my story. No neat endings, no perfect closure. Just a man who refuses to be defined by one betrayal. A man who found a strange sort of vengeance in taking back control of his own life and choosing, against all odds, to see if love can still grow in the cracks of broken trust. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough.